Hello and welcome back to this final mini episode of Kvikmyndapod, an Icelandic cinema podcast. That's it for films in Series 1, so I thought we'd end with a little chat about what we've seen and discovered. So we've come to the end of our first journey through Icelandic cinema. Ellie, what have we learnt? What have you enjoyed? And who have you enjoyed watching?
Well, my first lesson I've learned is don't sit on a squeaky chair. But on a more serious note, I feel like I've learned a lot about Iceland as a person who's coming to this completely fresh. I feel like I've learned about the Icelandic sense of humour in that it's incredibly dark and subtle, shall we say.
To the point of almost not existing.
Exactly. Got a sense of the culture, I think, a bit. I think that's fair to say. And also, I think, learn a bit about some of the challenges that Iceland is kind of grappling with at the moment. So, I mean, we've had a couple of films that have obviously been about the drugs usage and that issue.
Yeah. And
we've also had a couple that have really grappled with that issue of modernisation, I think. So, like Rams, how Iceland, this traditional society that's isolated, is transitioning into 21st century life. And I think that's something we also saw in Echo.
Definitely.
Yeah, so those were my kind of takeaways. What would you say?
Well, everything you've said, yeah, I would agree with. I think it's only been 6 films, but we really have seen quite a diverse range of stuff going on in Iceland. And yeah, we've touched on those specifically Icelandic subjects and themes, haven't we? Like, we have spent a lot of time in the capital, but we've also seen how traditional life is and was in Iceland. And I think going from that extreme of like people living in isolation in the hills farming sheep, and then on the other end of the spectrum having like the youth, perhaps in their own kind of isolation in a way, falling victim to the drugs and addiction. I think you can't really get much further removed from, place and subject matter. And the island is so tiny, it's quite amazing to see, really.
Yeah, and I think we've definitely had a focus this series, haven't we, on human stories and personal dramas, relationships. It's very much been about the characters rather than any kind of bombastic genre stuff.
Totally. We've not had a lot of action, have we, really? Not that kind of Hollywood style.
No. There's definitely a nuance there, isn't there, in the way that people think of from, say, Scandi noir. But beyond the crime drama genre, I think there's that understated somberness, I think, is fair to say.
And I think on that relationship front, we've seen a lot of family stuff going on in these films. It's one of the main themes of Jar City, and Magnea in Let Me Fall, with or without the support of her family, struggles through her life and her addiction. And, families as a common theme in all works of fiction. But I wonder whether that's something extra special in Iceland, where it's such a small country that the sort of families, the bonds are much stronger. We talked about how surnames are paternal rather than family names. And all of that kind of stuff. I think maybe family bonds are just that bit more to the front throughout fiction, I suppose.
It definitely seems to be a recurring theme, doesn't it? What are some of your favourite moments that we've had this series?
Favourite moments? I don't know whether my favourite moments are necessarily that happy. But
okay.
We're talking about family, so I'll start with one that comes to mind, and that's the chat with Magnea and her dad in the cafe in Let Me Fall.
Yeah.
Where he gives her a phone for her birthday. It's supposed to be a big day for her. And it just doesn't feel like that at all. He's trying to reconnect a bond with her, and it's not really working. And ultimately she runs off back to Stella, and it's all just a bit sad. But I think the acting in that scene, I love both of those actors, Thorstein Bachmann and Elín Sif Halldórsdóttir. And I just think that small scene kind of embodies just that idea of family and how easy it is to pull away, and how much you might want to pull your daughter or whoever it is into you.
Well, I think you raised a good point there about the acting being exemplary in that scene, but I think it has been like across the board in everything we've seen.
Absolutely.
I couldn't fault anyone really on their performances. What I was going to raise was a lot more flippant and
Go on.
perhaps show-offy, dramatic than the one you've picked. I was going to pick the stuffed dog on the doorstep in Under the Tree.
Yes.
Just the pure surprise factor. Like, that was truly something I don't think I've seen in cinema before, and it caught me off guard, and it was so bizarre that it kind of stuck with me. And then, of course, the whole preposterous final fight scene in Under the Tree also I wanted to shout out, just because it's very cathartic, isn't it, where a scene where you got a film where you've got simmering tensions throughout suddenly erupts into some kind of hysterical mania. So yeah, I enjoyed that. I love a bit of over the top drama.
No, completely. And I mean, the dog scene just is definitely the most surprising thing to have happened across this series. And I mean, what a way to end as well. It's absolutely balmy. And I can't believe that wasn't the first thing that came to my mind, to be honest. But yeah, absolutely just sort of epitomizes the dark humour that sort of undercurrents a lot of these films. But I mean, yeah, like you said, all the acting is just so good. I was trying to think, which performance maybe is my favourite. But everyone's in everything, and they're all so good. I think you just kind of see the range of everyone, really. Like in the first and the final film, Sigurður Sigurjónsson, who played Gummi in Rams.
You stole my answer.
Oh,
or
I'm
at
sorry.
least one of them.
Go on, you tell me why he's one of your favourites then.
I think he's one of my favourites because of his kind eyes. I know that sounds weird, but I feel like he just emits a kind of empathy and a very warm quality, even when he's being unappealing. He's definitely got that charisma that's hard to pin down. Why is he one of your favourites?
I mean, for similar reasons as you, I suppose. He sort of tops and tails our series, and his character Gummi, there's parts of that character that we see again in Baldwin in Under the Tree, where he doesn't quite go off the deep end like Inga, his wife. And I mean, that's a performance in itself, isn't it? Really, that is. I will come to her in a second, Edda Björgvinsdottir. But Sigurður Sigurjónsson, like you say, he's just kind of there in the background, just shocked and watching what's going on. And he's slightly more cautious and friendly with the neighbours, and can't quite believe what Inga's done. And I think that sort of sense of, like you say, friendliness or warmth is really enjoyable to watch.
I wanted to just give a shout out to the two leads in Let Me Fall as well, who were obviously only really quite young. I mean, you'll be able to help me out here, but Ellen Sif Halldórsdóttir and Erin Björk Jakobsdóttir. Because, yeah, I thought for such young people, they gave really nuanced and compelling performances that had me all the way through, whether they were being unsympathetic or sympathetic. They really had to display a huge range as well in terms of the progression of the characters that I really haven't seen in a film for quite a long time. So I thought they were completely believable and brilliant, both of them.
Definitely. And there's not much chance to do on-screen acting in Iceland, so to be at that stage so early on in your career is just mad, isn't it? They're absolutely brilliant, I agree. And then the older actresses who play them as older characters, Stella and Magnea, also without fault. But we could sit here and just go on about how everyone is amazing.
List everybody, yeah.
Just list everyone. Who else was there then?
Well, of course, the elder brother Kiddy in Rams, who we also saw come back with a truly deranged performance in Jar City.
Oh my God, yeah.
Which was very enjoyable as the kind of hard man, the biggest maniac in Iceland, wasn't it, his performance? And he really, chewed the scenery in that.
He really did. And it's quite interesting, actually, how you say we could see sort of Gummy slightly in Baldwin. And I think Kiddy, taken to the extreme, becomes his character in Jar City as well. Mm-hmm. Which I guess, if you've got a film and you want some, crazy older guy, he's your man. If you want an older guy who's a little bit more understated, Sigurður Jonsson's your man. And then if you want a dad, Thorstein Bachmann. It's as simple as that.
Very good, very good.
Favourite film then?
Oh God, I didn't know you were going to ask me this. I think I would have to say Let Me Fall. Not in the way that I enjoyed it the most, and surprisingly, it's quite hard to watch it sometimes. But I think for me, it was the one that really drew me in the most, and I couldn't look away from. I felt the pace kept up the whole time. I was so invested in the characters. So for me, I think it would be Let Me Fall.
Amazing.
How about you?
I mean, there's so much to love about that film. But for me, I think purely for the surprise you mentioned earlier, Under the Tree, it's such a slow burn. And then that happens. And I remember it just knocked me for 6.
Delightfully bonkers.
Like, just genuinely howling at that moment. Like, I can't fathom what has just happened. So, yeah, for that moment alone, totally worth it.
I would also like to give an honourable mention to Rams, because I do think it was a really good one to start off on, and maybe is a bit more of a slow burn than, say, the ones we've just talked about. And perhaps I don't have as much in common with some old sheep farmers in rural Iceland as I do some young women in Reykjavik. But I did think that it had some very nice moments in it, with the sheep in the basement being one. So, yeah, that might be my number 2, I reckon.
Excellent. I think for me, number 2, it goes to Jar City, because it was the first one I'd seen at the cinema, and I absolutely adore Ingvar Eggert Sigurðsson, who plays Erlander in that, and I really hope we'll be watching him again at some point.
Bring him back.
Oh yeah, bring him back. In fact, a couple of weeks ago on Icelandic Independence Day, 17th of June, Netflix released a TV series called Katla, which was Baltasar Kormákur's creation, and he actually appears in that. So I'm very excited to get stuck into that. Actually alongside the older Magnea from Let Me Fall and Thorstein Bachmann.
Oh, wow. Okay. A stellar cast then. That's a good thing for people to go away and get stuck into, that if they're missing the Icelandic films after this, right?
Absolutely. And hopefully it'll help us hook some more listeners in, because, I mean, it's going to be epic for sure. I'm very excited about that, I have to say. But all these actors and actresses, they're so multi-talented, though. You think that you could just do one job in Iceland and that would probably see you through, like the sheep farmers, perhaps. But everyone in the arts is so kind of multi-talented. It's unbelievable. While we've been on air, Ellen Sif Halldórsdóttir has released a single.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it is pretty lovely. So she's on Instagram under Ellen Hall, and the song's called Bjartar Nætur. And it's lovely. So check that out.
I will definitely be checking that out.
Talking of social media, thank you to everyone who follows us on Instagram and everyone who follows us on Twitter and has been liking and sharing and getting in touch to say they've been enjoying the films, and to point out when Icelandic films have been on the telly, because, they're not that easy to find. So when they're on things like Film 4, let us know if we don't already know, and we'll share it with everyone else. And let us know if there are any films you want us to discuss in the next series. Do you know any other Icelandic films, Ellie?
Well, I do know about a film called Woman at War.
Oh, yeah.
In which a woman seems to go to war with a telegraph pole, if that's correct. I'm sure it's a lot more nuanced and complex than that. So I'm imagining that might make an appearance. And I'm not really sure what else to expect. What have you got in your evil little mind?
Well, I've had a little think. I think Woman at War is a pretty good place to start, It is a little bit more than a lady fighting a telegraph pole. But as an image for what that film stands for, it's completely perfect. And it ties in with all the sort of current politics of environment and things going on in the world and in Iceland at the moment. So when we come back, I'm pretty sure that will be on the list. You know what we haven't spoken about? Icelandic horses.
Oh, we haven't. We've done sheep, but no horses yet.
No horses. So I have a feeling we might do some horses next time.
Okay.
So I'll leave that one to stir.
Now there is a cliffhanger if ever you knew one. Go away and research what that Icelandic horses film might be.
Yeah, those in the know will know exactly what I'm referring to. But any recommendations will be absolutely welcome. We'll be back later in the year. Don't know quite when, but you'll be here, won't you?
I'll be around. As soon as it's winter again and I can put on my big knits, I'll be ready to go.
Amazing, because I think we timed this absolutely perfectly, really. You know, height of summer, all these wintry films.
It's exactly what people want at this time of year.
But what's quite exciting was that we did release Under the Tree on summer solstice, which I think is pretty cool because on the summer solstice, it's a big celebration, obviously, around the world. But Iceland, as you know, the sun doesn't set over the summer months, and it's quite a big day, actually. In fact, I was at a festival over the summer solstice a few years ago called Secret Solstice, and it was amazing. I even saw Radiohead.
Oh, that was an unexpected anecdote.
I'm full of them. Okay, well, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Ellie, for joining me on this journey through Icelandic cinema.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll give you a call when we're off back around the country again.
All right, I'll see you then. Thanks very much.
Cheers. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed listening to Ellie and I get to grips with all the many wonderful and disturbing elements that make up movies produced in Iceland. We've certainly had a lot of fun. Before I go, I just wanted to do a proper shout out to those people who helped get this podcast going and to those of you who have engaged with us so far. Firstly, thanks to Mike Munzer of the Evolution of Horror podcast, with who I first recorded a podcast and who let me ask all the inane questions about how to get this one started. And to Steph McKenna of the Thirst podcast, who also gave me answers when I was getting a little bit confused. To Sophie Watts for the fantastic artwork based on a picture that I took up in the West Fjords a few years ago. And to Jez Diaper and the band Branches Bare for their song Half-Light, which we use as the intro and the outro to the podcast. A perfect fit. And to everyone who has said they've enjoyed listening, alerted us to Icelandic films on the telly, and asked the questions we don't have the answers to, thank you for listening and stay in touch. We love hearing from you. We'll be back again later this year, but in the meantime, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram where we're at Kvikmyndapod. That's KVIKMYNDAPOD. Share us with family and friends, and leave us a rating and a lovely review on Apple Podcasts. See you soon. Takk og bless. Thanks and goodbye.